What's up, guys? Welcome to Mets Off Day Live. I'm your host, Niki Lattarulo. Today, I am joined by SNY contributor John Jastremski and Mets radio broadcaster Pat McCarthy. Guys, thanks so much for joining us. The Mets' struggles obviously continue. Swept by the Brewers, making it 7 straight losses. They are 1-11 in their last 12 games. We thought the Mets getting one hit leading into our last show here was bad. Yesterday's loss may have been the icing on the cake. Up 5-0, ended up getting walked off in the ninth. Isaac Collins off of Edwin Diaz. Feels like at this point, Mets are just finding a way to lose games. Pat, I'll start with you. How do things just keep unraveling for the Mets, especially in that game?
I don't know, Nikki, because it certainly seems like what can go wrong will go wrong with this team right now. And I'm going to be honest, when Cedric Mullins hit the home run last night and the Mets were up 5-0, I felt pretty good about where they were at. And then, this base hit happens with Joey Ortiz. And right before that, Contreras had hit the solo home run. And that 3-run fourth inning against Sean Manaea was really important. But they're just having trouble making that one big pitch or getting that one big swing when they need it. You score 6 runs in a game, you should win. We said the same thing with the pitching staff, that when you allow 3 runs, you should win. So unfortunately right now, it just seems like when the pitching is there, the hitting isn't there. And when the hitting is there, they don't get the big hit when they need to. So there's just a lot of things right now that need to be cleaned up. And I do think that it just seems like it's rock bottom each and every night.
Yeah, and I feel like when you're up 5-0, there really shouldn't be any excuses to lose that game. JJ,
No.
do you think the gut-wrenching loss after gut-wrenching loss starts to weigh on like the mental side of things for this team? Do you think that the confidence eventually is going to start to go down?
That's human nature, Nikki, obviously, but I think it's a bigger problem. More so, hey, get some length out of these starting pitchers. It's pretty simple. We have spent so much time talking about, hey, this Met bullpen, the overuse, the idea that you've seen so many of these guys going 3, 4, 4.5 innings at a time. Sooner rather than later, that is going to catch up with you. And to Pat's point, the Mets are up 5-0 in this game. Manaea's on the mound. They desperately need a win. I'm thinking this is going to be a cruise control type of victory. Doesn't end up being the case. And I know we can discuss Helsley and his inability to do the job in the 8th inning. And yeah, we can talk about Edwin Diaz giving up the home run in the 9th inning. But if Sean Manaea can go and give you more length, I think the entire equation of the game looks drastically different. And the problem the Mets keep running into, their starters are not going deep enough in the ball games. It's overtaxing their bullpen. You combine that with the fact that the Met lineup just doesn't seem to get the big hit. They're scoring runs, but it feels like in big situations with ducks on the pond, they've been brutal all year. That's how you allow what was a comfortable lead for the division wild card. They were neck and neck with the Phillies. I shouldn't say comfortable lead. It was neck and neck with the Phillies, back and forth like ping pong, but super comfortable as far as like wild card and playoff positioning and standing and all that comes with it. Now all of a sudden, gang, we got ourselves a race here for the final 2 months of the year. Not where you want to be in Metland.
Yeah, definitely not where you want to be. And we're going to talk about the starting pitching, the bullpen, the additions, all that in a little bit. But let's just talk about big picture. This is the second time this year the Mets have lost 7 games in a row. They did go on a run where they won 6 or 7 games in a row. But Pat, why have they been so streaky? You're in that clubhouse. What do you see from this group?
It's inconsistency. And at times they're clicking on all cylinders, and at other times, they all go cold. And that was the storyline a lot early this season, that 3 or 4 guys were hitting at a time. It wasn't all 9, but all 9 weren't cold at the same time like we're seeing right now. I think that's the biggest issue, is why this team is so streaky, is because we haven't seen them put it all together at one time. Yeah, they've been able to do it for 2 or 3 games at a time, which is when they've rallied off wins and when they've gone for sweeps. But when you aren't getting consistency up and down the lineup, you're going to have streaks. I don't think we'd ever imagined it to be this drastic, where they're losing 14 of 16, then going and winning 14 of 16, or whatever the numbers are specifically. But that kind of seems how it is right now. And I want to go back to like those early first 2 months when there were 21 games over 500. We kept saying, man, how are they figuring out how to win these games despite the fact that they aren't putting everything together? Now it kind of feels like this was inevitable, that they are going on these little droughts and they're having these peaks and these valleys. And the biggest thing is the fact that the peaks are high, the valleys are low, and they really haven't been able to maintain that consistency. So that way, yeah, maybe they win 2 of 3 here, maybe they drop 2 of 3 here, but for the most part, they play relatively even. We just haven't seen that.
I think it's also when it's earlier in the season, you're like, okay, it's fine if they've lost a bunch in a row. Like now we're getting close to September. So losing 7 in a row feels like being 5.5 games behind Philly is just too big of a chunk this late in the season. JJ, like I said, they've lost 7 in a row before, but does this time feel a little different, or are you like, oh, no doubt in my mind, they're going to bounce back and be fine?
So I think they're going to ultimately be fine as far as playoff positioning is concerned, Nikki. But let's take us back to where we were in spring training, and let's take us back to where we were over the first 2 months of the year. There's not one Met fan on planet Earth that went into the start of this year saying, yeah, I'm going to be satisfied if the Mets are basically fighting and holding on for dear life for the final wild card spot within the National League. That's not what this season was supposed to be about. This season was supposed to be about taking the next step. And that to me is what's disappointing about what you've seen in this particular run. The Mets go and load up their bullpen at the trade deadline. They spent $750 million on Juan Soto. It's okay. We were in the NLCS last year. Let's build upon that. And it does go to show you that baseball now, especially in 2025, is a year by year by year type of sport. It's tough to recreate the same sort of mojo and swagger and confidence that you can have the prior year. It doesn't work that way. There's enough talent in the room to get themselves in the playoffs. Are they going to be playing their best going into the postseason? Because if they are, and all of a sudden they get more length out of their starters, and you feel good about the back end of the bullpen, and guys at the bottom of the order are complimenting the guys like Lindor and Alonso and Soto, then hey, it's the Met team that you envisioned in April, dare I say, making a run at a championship. But at this particular moment in the season, the Mets don't have that feel. They don't have that look, and there's a lot that they have to clean up with a schedule that after the Atlanta Braves, and I know it's weird saying the Atlanta Braves, terrible team, easy wins. It's just weird saying that. But after that, the schedule does get a little treacherous for the Mets. So they're going to have to be at their best.
I don't even think we could say easy win at this point because they can go up 10-0. And I think you're still waiting and hoping that they can pull out the win. But Pat, I want to follow up on something JJ said. He said last year's team had the swag and the mojo. Do you think this year's team has swag and mojo, or are they just maybe were the expectations too high going into the year that now they're like under so much pressure? Like, what can you pinpoint that's just making it so different this year?
Yeah, I think success can create swagger, and it creates the ability to play loose and have fun. And when you're blowing 5-0 leads in the middle innings, you aren't able to play loose. You're playing tight because the expectation has become all of a sudden, oh man, what's going to happen next? Whereas last year, every situation where the Mets found themselves down, you felt like somebody was going to have that big swing. They were going to scrap across a run somehow, or somebody was going to hit a home run. It just doesn't really feel that way right now. Now, that's not to say that that can change. There's a lot of season left. And at this time last year, the Mets have been swept by the Seattle Mariners, and they'd scored just the 1 run. They were 4 games over 500, and it felt like, all right, maybe the magic's starting to run out. Now, it's a little bit different because they went from 11 games under to 4 games over, but they're still in a better position right now than they were at this time last year. But the difference being is they're losing games right now that they were winning last year, and they're just not playing total team baseball. And it does come back to the starting pitching. It comes back to the guys at the top of the order. And when they're having fun, they're playing with flair. And when they're playing with flair, they're loose. And I just don't think we're seeing that right now. And I remember asking guys a lot last year, does winning create fun or does fun create winning? And right now, I just don't think we're seeing either one because they said that there was a balance of that last year. And we're just certainly not seeing that, unfortunately.
We're also seeing some rare emotions from guys because normally these guys like keep their composure, especially when the cameras are on and when they're in the dugout and they know it's on the broadcast. We saw Francisco Lindor pounding his glove into the ground after his error. They're obviously the tensions are high, which is understandable with losing this many games. But JJ, do you like that they're showing the emotions, or do you think now they're getting too in their heads?
You know, I'm a very even-keeled, I don't show a whole lot of emotion kind of guy. No, I'm just kidding. I love it, guys. I love the emotion because that's how the Met fan is feeling right now. we all know how talented a shortstop Francisco Lindor is. We all know what a great player he is. And I don't know, like if I'm watching that game on Sunday and my team melts down and my shortstop who can't get a hit over the last month, all of a sudden, shorthanded in the field makes a big error in this particular game. Yeah, I want to see that he cares. And I'm not saying that if he didn't show the emotion, he doesn't care. Like that's not the point I'm trying to illustrate. What I'm trying to illustrate is the going is tough at the moment. And I want the players to feel that same sense of urgency and emotion that a whole lot of Met fans were feeling watching this game on a Sunday afternoon. Because, I mean, I'm sure there were a whole lot of Met fans watching it when Diaz gave up a home run, when Lindor booting the ball. They're taking their remotes and they're throwing them into the couch or they're banging something or whatever. So when I see that from a player, at least the way I read it is good. I'm glad he cares.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think whenever you're a fan of a team, you want to see them smashing their helmet down. You're like, why do you not care? Why do you not feel these emotions? Pat, again, you're around these guys. Do you think someone like Lindor, who's like the quote unquote captain of this team, the leader in the clubhouse, when he's struggling, does that weigh on just like the mental and the pressure the other guys put on themselves?
Yeah, I think so, because I think they look to those guys as the catalysts and they look to those guys as the main roles. So if all of a sudden the guys hitting 7th, 8th, and 9th feel like that they need to step up and they need to make a big hit because the guys ahead of them aren't, yeah, there could be some pressure there and they could be beginning to press a little bit. So I think these guys, although they're all professionals and they're all the top 1% of players in the world, there's still that upper echelon of player that you're relying on. There's a reason that they're batting 1 through 4. There's a reason that they're making all this money. It's because you expect them to produce. So there is a trickle-down effect, absolutely, that when one guy isn't producing, all of a sudden the next guy feels like he needs to step up. And we hear these guys say a lot that when things are going right, it's pass the baton, allow the next guy to get the job done as well. But at a certain point, somebody's going to try and sprint a little bit harder or try to do something a little bit bigger because they feel like that's the only option. And that's just not a recipe for success for this team. 1 through 9, this team has to be clicking. And at the very least, 1 through 4, 1 through 5, you need at least 2 or 3 of those guys to be able to carry the load. And right now, that's just not the case.
It's kind of crazy that the top 4 guys, the guys that are like, all right, they can carry this team, are just playing so bad all at the same time. We've heard Carlos Mendoza say that's the most surprising thing from him as a manager. He's like, how are they all struggling at the same time? But now let's talk about Carlos Mendoza. JJ, do you think he's kind of to blame with this slump, or is it just the players not living up to how they should be playing?
Yeah, to me, this is entirely on the players. And I think when it comes to managers and not getting the most out of their team, you have to evaluate the situation. You have to look at what's going right and what's going wrong. Well, let's evaluate what's going wrong for the Mets. They can't have starters consistently flame out the way they're flaming out in these games. That, to me, is not a managerial problem. That, to me, is a staff problem. That is on the starting rotation. Then we look at the struggles of some of your best players. Francisco Lindor is basically the de facto captain of the team. He had every big hit imaginable in 2024. Hasn't been as productive. Hasn't been as good. Juan Soto, for as brilliant as his June might have been, I know the numbers as a whole are still pretty darn good. Has Juan Soto been as good as he was last year for the New York Yankees? No. He hasn't had as many big hits as he had for the Yankees in 2024. So, like, when I evaluate all of this, I say, okay, how much of this is falling on the manager? And to me, it's not a whole lot. And I think because of the fact that Carlos Mendoza earned so much goodwill with the way he kept the Mets together last year, the way they dug themselves out of 11 games under 500, I could look at certain managers and say they're in trouble and their performance should be under the microscope. I don't feel the same way with Carlos Mendoza. Now, again, Mets miss the playoffs. Everybody is going to be, dare I say, under the gun a little bit. That's how it works in New York City. That's just par for the course. You don't like it, go manage somewhere else. But I think this is far more about the totality of the things going wrong, not like a lack of accountability issue or guys making boneheaded mistakes, although we did see a few of those yesterday on Sunday. To me, far more about the sums it apart, not necessarily the guy at the head of the snake.
Yeah, Pat, he just said if they don't make the playoffs, could be under the gun a little bit. Do you think, I mean, fans are starting to be like turning on Mendoza a little bit. I think that's just what happens when you lose games. But do you think if the Mets miss the playoffs, he's in the hot seat?
No, I don't think so. I think that Carlos he's such a tremendous manager, and I'm with JJ. I just don't think that this is on him. Now, of course, he is the manager, so he's going to be the guy that people look to when things aren't going right. But being around Carlos Mendoza every day, this is such a smart baseball guy. He's a tremendous person. He cares. He gets his players. He gets the city, and there needs to be consistency with this franchise. The Mets just haven't had a manager stick around since Terry Collins that has been able to right the ship and get things done. I think even if the Mets miss the playoffs, and this is a colossal collapse, I don't think Mendy's job is in jeopardy. I just think he's too good of a manager. I think David recognizes that. I think Steve and the ownership recognize that. I just think he means too much to this organization to even consider that. Now, of course, if the Mets miss the playoffs, there are going to be questions that need to be answered. And could there be changes to the coaching staff? Yeah, there's always potential for changes to the coaching staff. But at the end of the day, this roster is not a work in progress. It's a roster that was assembled to win. And if guys aren't producing, it comes down to that. So, no, I don't think that Carlos's job is at risk if the Mets miss the playoffs. I don't think the Mets will miss the playoffs, and I don't think this is even going to be a conversation. But either way, I don't think he's in jeopardy.
Yeah, it's not like he's making bad decisions. It's like literally no one can pitch into the fifth inning and no one can hit the ball. But let's talk about the pitching. JJ keeps bringing it up. As we know, they can't get length from their starting pitcher. In this series against the Brewers, no one threw for more than 4 1/3 innings, which is just, I feel like, unacceptable when you have these good arms. The pitching lab last year was credited so much success. This year, early season success. JJ, I know you've been wanting to talk about this. Why can't they figure out a way to get more innings from their starters?
Yeah, it's a great question, Niki. And look, I think you have to applaud David Stearns and you have to applaud the Mets with Jeremy Hefner for the way they got Sherman last year to pitch at his very best. Griffin Canning early in the year was productive. Clay Holmes being able to make that transition to being a starter had a couple of really, really good months. But now I think you have to look at your starting pitchers and say, how can we get more out of them as far as being more economical and being more efficient? I don't have the answer to that question. I think if the Mets had the answer to that question, they would have figured it out already because it's costing their team dearly. But I think if we're going to identify 2 individuals in the rotation and say, hey, we need more length out of the 2 of you respectively, it's got to be Sean Manaea, who now is fully back from the injury. You know, we're not hearing about pitch count anymore. The training wheels are off for Sean Manaea. Then there's Kodai Senga. And this has been a big complaint of mine with Kodai Senga for this entire year. I know the numbers are pretty good. I need more length out of you, big boy. I do. I can't have you out of these games in 4 2/3 and 5 innings. I don't care if you're only giving up a run. You got to go and be the man. You know, Clay Holmes, I know the situation. I know he hasn't started games before. You can't expect him to be a guy that's going 7 innings or 6 innings consistently. Those 2 big guys at the top of the rotation, joining David Peterson, gotta give me more length. So I don't know if that's Hefner. I don't know if that's, hey, the pitching lab. I look at the arms. Hey, fellas, You're throwing the baseball. Go deeper in the ball games. Let's go.
Do you think, Pat, does it have anything to do with the injuries that maybe they're not fully healthy, or is it something more with especially those 2 guys?
Yeah, obviously both those guys missed a lot of time, talking about Manaea and Senga. So, but at this point, they're pretty much built back up. Like JJ said, the training wheels are off. These guys have reached a full threshold of pitch counts. They expect them to go 90, 95. And if a guy throws 95 pitches, ideally that's 6 or 7 innings. It's not sustainable to ask your bullpen to get 15 outs every single game, no matter how much of a power pen you build. It's just not possible because they're not going to be perfect every single night. That's not realistic to ask these guys. They're going to give up runs every once in a while. So if you're asking 3 guys to hold the lead, yeah, that's possible. When you're asking 5 guys to hold the lead, there's a better chance that one of them is going to give it up. So it comes down to somebody outside of David Peterson is going to have to start giving the Mets a little bit of length, because it's not a reasonable expectation even for Peterson to expect him to go 7 innings every single time, because he's going to have starts where he doesn't. And that's okay because he's earned that because of how he's thrown the ball. So the Mets need guys like Manaea and Senga to be able to go deeper into games. They know that. Sean said it yesterday that he knows he has to be better. And we can't just see flashes of it for 3-4 innings. We have to see them be able to put it together for 5, gut their way through 6, or give them 6 and figure out a way to get through 7 and give these bullpen arms a little bit of leeway. So that way, in October, when maybe it is set up to do a 5 and fly start, these guys are rested and ready to go to have success. So it's going to have to start, because the pitching at some point is going to have to step up and carry this team.
Yeah, this starting rotation is not. Maybe they'll get you into the playoffs by the skin of your nose, but they're not going to get you far in the playoffs. The super pen was supposed to be the answer to all these problems. The starting pitcher will start to make its length, and then the super pen will carry things all the way to the end. But it's not really living up to the expectations. Ryan Helsley, 5 runs in his 5 appearances since joining the team. Tyler Rogers was pitching well. Then he did receive the loss against the Guardians. Those two haven't really given the spark they were expected to. JJ, what are your thoughts on the trade deadline acquisitions? And do you think now at this point Stearns is kicking himself for not getting a starting pitcher?
Well, listen, I think a whole lot of teams, Niki, wanted to get starting pitchers. I think the Mets are in that camp. I think the Yankees were in that camp. I think there were a lot of teams that wanted to go and add to their rotations. The cost was just way too high for these teams. And when I look at that around the sport, it's tough for me to kill, let's say, David Stearns individually, because look at the other GMs. They found themselves in the exact same predicament, and they couldn't land the starter. So I'll give him a pass for that, number one. As far as these guys out of the bullpen, look, it's still too early to tell. For me to look at Helsley and to look at Rogers and to say, oh, these guys aren't going to pan out. They're not going to be able to handle New York. They're not going to be able to make this the super pen. Let's see how it shakes out over the final 2 months, because I don't care how efficient and how effective Helsley and Rogers might have been for San Francisco and St. Louis. It's a different animal when you're pitching in New York City. It just is. Like, we've seen so many talented guys. We're watching it on the other side of town with Devin Williams, who is a super talented reliever, and I think is clearly a little bit spooked by what's going on pitching in the 9th inning and pitching for the New York Yankees. So that's an adjustment period. I do like the fact that neither one of those guys is necessarily pitching in the 9th inning. So you're kind of taking that burden of pressure off of them. Helsley's got really good stuff. I think he'll be fine. Rogers, what I love about him, he can pitch every day. He's like me back on the varsity Patrides. It's like, I'm throwing 70. Give me the ball. I'm ready to go. I want to pitch. I want to pitch. I want to pitch. You love that. You got to manage that. I do think these bullpen arms are going to be fine. There's another bullpen arm that I love that I'm really down on. We'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. But I think it's a little too early for judgment quite yet.
Pat, what do you think? Too early for judgment, or are you like, should have got a starting pitcher?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think the price of starting pitching was way too high. And David Stearns is not going to go out and trade some of these top prospects for a rental starting pitcher. Now, if you could have gone and gotten a Joe Ryan or a Sandy Alcantara, somebody that you could have had for a couple of years, all right, then you can justify it a little bit more. But again, you're not going to completely sell the farm system for it. He had a really good deadline, like a really solid trade deadline. Going out and getting Gregory Soto, going and getting Tyler Rogers, going and getting Ryan Helsley and Cedric Mullins, you pretty much checked every single box that you could have asked for. And, when it comes to Helsley and Rogers, I agree, it's too early. Like Rogers, that game against the Guardians, he gave up a couple of singles. Like, he's going to put the ball on the ground. Sometimes it's going to find the outfield grass. Like, that's just how baseball works, right? But he's not walking guys a ton. He's not hitting a ton of guys. He's giving up soft contact that sometimes it's happened to find some outfield grass. It is what it is. But he did yesterday exactly what Tyler Rogers was brought in to do. Come in a tight game. Sure, he allowed a couple of base runners, but he got a double play ball when he needed to. That's why you have a ground ball pitcher. And for Helsley, it was such a weird outing. Like, he was out of it, and he got called for a pitch timer violation at the very last second. So, no, I don't think there's anything to be concerned about with those two guys.
Someone that I think there is to be concerned about, Ryan Stannic, allowed 8 runs in 4 games pitched in August. Obviously, we know he's been very hit or miss all season. JJ, what's the root of his inconsistency, and are you out on him at this point?
So I was very in on Stannic last year. To me, other than Edwin Diaz, he was the most reliable reliever for the Mets down the stretch of those playoff games, unless you want to include David Peterson in that equation. Like, I wanted him back. I thought he fit perfectly. He obviously has a lot of experience pitching big games. Tampa early in his career, then pitching with the Houston Astros and winning a championship. We see this with relievers, though. There are just some years you don't have it. That, to me, is what I've seen from Ryan Stannic so far this season. He doesn't have it. The command has not been there. He's had way too many blow-up outings. Now, we have seen with relievers, you can get on a hot streak, and all of a sudden, if you start putting them in more low-leverage situations, they gain some confidence, they gain some trust. Maybe all of a sudden, if you're Carlos Mendoza, you start putting Stannic back in those big spots to see how he handles it, and then you kind of act accordingly. That, to me, is how I would manage Ryan Stannic. To me, gang, he can't be, with all of the arms they added in the bullpen at the trade deadline. You got Diaz, you got Rogers, you got Helsley, you have Reed Garrett, all four of those guys. Soto, for that matter, they're throwing the ball better than Stannic. Stannic can't be in those big spots until he goes and earns it. Bottom line.
Pat, what do you think? How should the Mets handle him? And do you think they should keep confidence in him until he figures it out? Or should he just be out of the whole equation at this point?
Yeah, I think with Stannic, there's a couple of things. The biggest thing is, and when you watch some of those highlights back, look at the counts, right? He's getting ahead. He's getting to 2 strikes. He's just not really able to put guys away. He's not getting the swing and miss that he did last year. And that's a big factor. He's also getting pretty unlucky. If you look at some of that contact, especially in that Brewers series the other day, it's a flare, it's a dunk into right, it's a swinging bunt that ends up going for a hit. So he's getting unlucky, but a lot of that comes with the fact that guys are putting the ball in play against him. And he did have that pretty massive blow-up outing against the Giants, and there have been a handful of those this season. But the advantage is with the acquisitions that you made, you don't need to use Ryan Stannic in those high-leverage situations anymore. You can use him in the 5th inning, or you use him in the 6th inning, because he's not your number one guy to set up Edwin Diaz anymore. It is interesting. Relievers are so hit and miss. It's exactly like JJ said, that one year they're an all-star, the next year they're just not really throwing the ball as well. Stannic was a massive acquisition at the deadline last year, and I was thrilled when they re-signed him because I thought he could really help this pen. Unfortunately, right now, he's just not having that type of success. They need to get him right because the fastball's electric, right? It's still 100. It's still 101. He's got to figure out the splitter. He's leaving it over the plate right now. He knows it. But he's got to get swing and miss because that's what makes Ryan Stannic so effective. And right now, that's just not the case.
And it all comes back to starting pitching, because if the starters were able to go a little longer, there wouldn't be so much time for him to have to come in and get outs. But speaking about starting pitching, we know every fan keeps asking on X or anywhere, like, where are these big prospects? Call them out, call them up. Jonah Tong, Jet Williams, Carson Bench, Ryan Clifford all got promoted to AAA yesterday. Pat, I'll go back to you. Is this a sign Nolan McLean and Brandon Sprout may be on their way up shortly?
Yeah, it could be. Because I think the Mets are searching for some types of answers right now. I don't know if it'll be both of them, but the rosters do expand a little bit in September. Now, it's not the full 40 like we're used to seeing, but you do get that extra arm out there. So, yeah, we could see one of these young guys at this point. I think at this point, the Mets are going to do anything to get some starting pitching length. And we saw Nolan McLean's last outing with the 7 strikeouts. He's been really good. Brandon Sproat, he definitely took some adjustment periods with AAA, but he has been spectacular in the later months of this summer. What's interesting about the difference between AA and AAA is there's a lot of things, right? The number one thing being the baseball is that these guys are now using a major league ball, which is different than what they use in the lower levels of the minor leagues. So sometimes it takes guys a little bit of adjusting to get used to the new ball, how to create the necessary spin. But these guys have absolutely electric stuff. And what makes a guy like Nolan McLean so interesting is that he's only been a full-time pitcher for a couple of years now. This was a two-way player, not only at Oklahoma State, but also when he got to the minor leagues initially. So they've turned him into a starting pitcher. The stuff is electric, and he's turned himself into a bona fide blue-chip prospect. And I think at some point we're going to see one, maybe two of these guys. I think the fact that the Mets are valuing some success at AAA is a good thing. I'd like to see these guys have not only success, but also a little bit of failure and see how they dig themselves out. Brandon Sproat had a really tough time when he got to AAA last year after he went to the Futures game in AA, and then eventually the first half of this season. The fact that he's turned himself back into a blue chip prospect, I think is a really good sign. So yeah, I think that there's a chance that we could see one, if not both of these guys, if not in the immediate future, but by the end of the season, I would be shocked if both of them aren't up at some point.
I think eventually they're gonna have seen enough from the starting pitching they have right now. I need to call one of those guys up. JJ, do you think there's a chance Mets double up on their starting pitching in order to not overload the bullpen? And do you think Sproat or McLean could fill into that role?
No question. It's a question to me of when, not if, Nikki, because there's also the elephant in the room involving Coy Holmes. It's all well and good. The Mets keep telling you, hey, he's fine. This is what he's been built up for. He's going to be able to withstand, getting through this season as a starter. Are we sure? I can't say with certainty over the next 6 to 7 weeks he's going to be able to get through that. So, yeah, I think one of these guys is going to have a role on this team at some point in time. And the good news for the Mets is you almost have a little competition down in AAA where it's like, okay, whoever you feel better about and whoever is throwing the ball better going into the month of September maybe is the guy to go and get those opportunities. So, hey, fellas, you want to duke it out? You want to be in the show? You want to be pitching big games in September? Go pitch your tail off the next few weeks. You might get that chance.
Mets fans are praying that they can get up here soon. I think they need some sort of breath of fresh air, something to maybe spark this team, and a young guy could usually do that. Let's look ahead. Mets have a crucial series against, like you said, JJ, struggling Atlanta. They're 51-67 right now, so they know that they're probably not going to make the playoffs this year, but they always step up when they play against the Mets. Pat, how important is it for the Mets to just make a statement in that series?
It's not just this series. It's the next 2 weeks. Because the Mets are going to play Atlanta this week, and then they're going to play a really tough Seattle team. Mariners are out west. Sometimes they get overlooked. Maybe it's a little bit more because Cal Raleigh's taken the world by storm, so people know about Seattle more. But you're playing Atlanta, a team that you need to beat. You need to take at least 2 of 3. Then you got to figure out a way to step up against the Seattle team. After that, you go to Washington, and then you go to Atlanta again. These 2 weeks, the Mets have to take advantage because then all of a sudden you're meeting up with the Phillies. And that series against the Phillies later on in this month could be a make or break series. Mets have a really difficult schedule coming up. And the Braves, as we know, despite the fact that they are a down team, they're not going to make the playoffs. They are going to do everything they can to play spoiler. Teams get up for these types of games. And even though it's in August and it's not a game that means anything for the Braves in terms of getting back into the wild card race, they would love to play spoiler. And these are the final 2 times you're going to see the Braves this year. So you got to step up. You're going to go down to the House of Horrors next week, and that's going to be another tough matchup. So I just think that the Mets have to figure out a way to win 7 of 10, figure out a way to win 8 of 10. Like, they need that type of run right now. But frankly, I would settle for a 500 record over the next 2 weeks just to get things right and even things out a little bit and right the ship. But these are a massive 2 weeks because the schedule does not get any easier from here. This is the biggest stretch right now for this team.
We just need to see them win a game and then win another game, make it back-to-back wins for the first time, and God only knows how long. JJ, do you need to see more from the offense in this series or in these next couple of weeks, or the pitching?
Can I say all of the above, Nikki? Because really, we've been talking about the lack of length from the starting pitching, so I'll go the other way and focus on the offense. The Atlanta Braves pitching staff is absolutely depleted. Their bullpen absolutely stinks. That means if you get the Brave starters out of these games, you should be able to go to town on Atlanta's bullpen. And yeah, I do think building some confidence within this lineup is massive. So that means getting Francisco Lindor straightened out, figuring out what's going on with him, getting Juan Soto on one of those heaters like we saw in the month of June. But more importantly for Juan Soto, having him come through in these big spots, have a few Met moments, for goodness sakes. We know he's capable. We know it's within his power. So go and do it. Yeah, I think this offense, with the schedule that is kind of laid out in front of them with Atlanta now, 6 or 7 games coming up over the next 2 weeks, should be a good time to get right.
Like you mentioned, Pat, Mets are 5.5 games behind the Phillies for the lead in the NL East. They play the Phillies 7 more times this season. Do you think they let the NL East slip away and they should be focusing on the wild card, or do they still have a chance to win the division?
Slip away, no. Slipping away, yes. Because if it gets any bigger than this, all of a sudden those 7 games become a lot less manageable. Because right now you're in a position that if you win those, if you take 4 of those 7 games, you feel pretty good about where you're at. But the Phillies have a much lighter schedule than the Mets do right now the rest of the way. So you don't want to be chasing in September, but you want to be in a position that when you go into a series like these 2 teams are going to have in September, you want to be in a position that you can chip away, make up some ground, and potentially even leapfrog the Phillies in the standings. So you're not going to make 5.5 up right now, but you do have a 4-game series coming up. So if all of a sudden that's a 3-game lead, you feel a lot better about where you're at. But it's going to start one game at a time. It's a really interesting series between the Phillies and the Reds coming up this week, I should say, because the Reds are right on your heels now for that final wild card spot. They're only a game and a half back. So it becomes the ultimate question of which team are you rooting for? Are you rooting for the Reds to win some games and chip away at that final wild card spot, but cut into the Phillies National League East? Or do you want the Phillies to create a little bit of room between you and the Reds? It's really early to be scoreboard watching, but we are getting to that point.
Yeah, I was going to say very early for us to be like, oh, they're a half game back. There's this much time left, blah, blah, blah. But the time is going quick. The Mets pitching really needs to step it up. It's Clay Holmes on the mound tomorrow as the Mets open up their series against the Braves. Guys, that's all the time we have here on Mets Off Day Live. For JJ and Pat, I'm Nikki. We will see you back here next time.